Hello, Croeso Fulcher. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone's having a great Sunday and a great weekend. So last week we looked at the news article and the scientific journal that was based off of the study that had been conducted, which suggested a matriarchal society in parts of Celtic society in the British Isles. And I got through half of the presentation, and following on from last week, I'm going to look at Maeve from Irish mythology, because she is the figure who seems to most embody this, strong female leader with also connections to the sovereignty of Ireland, and ultimately people also discuss her role as a sovereignty goddess of sorts. That archetype, she embodies that archetype. Now, I've read the Feast of Bricrew, the Toynbee Coolnia as well. Some of the texts where she appears the most, and she's bold. She's described as a virago, so a woman with the vigor of a man. In Latin, and yeah, she leads excursions. She battles heroes, and also, in order to be king, well, you must be chosen by Maeve. So, I'm not an Irish scholar. I don't read the Irish language, so up front, apologies if I mispronounce any of the Irish words. Other than that, my sort of area lies in learning ancient Greek. So I'm in my third year of doing that now. And it's not just learning ancient Greek, it's also the philology. And I also have an interest in, how that connects in the larger, broader, Proto-Indo-European. And also, what I'm going to be discussing is, when I'm reading these texts, there's quite a lot of what I believe is a preservation of a kind of mystery initiation, because Maeve carries out this, she bestows kingship, and the process in which that is done, it is called a banais ríghe, or a kingship wedding. And she ultimately bestows the sovereignty, and she hands a mead cup as well to the prospective king, and it's an initiation. It's initiating him into that role of king. And also, when I'm reading the texts, there's a lot of descriptive words. There's a lot of language that I've seen regarding or relating to the mysteries over on the Greek side. So what I'm going to present today, I'm going to present an overview of Maeve, an overview of the of sovereignty goddess, and how some scholars have connected it to hieros gamos over on the Greek side, as well as connecting it Maeve. They are saying that she has similar connotations to Inanna Ishtar, Venus and Aphrodite. And you can certainly, in my opinion, I can see that coming through. So other scholars have made this connection as well. So it's not just me making it up. There's other people out there who are also making these connections, other scholars. So I'm going to be showing, as well as an overview of this, I'm going to show a journal that's been written, which has the it has the opinion of other scholars all collated in there regarding her etymology, how she connects to a larger Indo-European sphere. And then I'm going to show you another scholar who also looks into the mysteries, and I'm going to show how similar language is being used as well, and even how there could potentially be a linguistic connection between the names as well. So that's the order of the day. Let's get into it. Now, an overview of Maeve here. So a husband in the core stories of the cycle, although she has had, so I've highlighted this just to show that she has had multiple husbands, and you see this this throughout the corpus relating to Maeve. So even though in the Ulster cycle she's married to Allele, she has had several husbands before him who were also kings of Connaught. Maeve is strong-willed, ambitious, cunning and promiscuous, and is an archetypal warrior queen. She is believed by some to be a manifestation of the sovereignty goddess. Maeve of Connaught is probably identical with Maeve Lethderg, the sovereignty goddess of Tara. Okay, so this section is, I know quite a lot of you already know who Maeve is and such. This is just for people who maybe they've never seen this before. So we're just giving an overview. We're going to go into the scholarly texts after this overview. But I just wanted to highlight here, mention of a promiscuity here, that she's an archetypal warrior queen. As I said, she's called a virago, which is a term used in the Latin text for some goddesses too, and I'll show you that later. It also says here how she's probably identical with this other Maeve, who's the sovereignty goddess of Tara as well. So we're also going to be looking at that. Okay, so now this is just showing an overview of the etymology of her name. So there seems to be two trains of thought. One that it's derived from a root relating to mead, or one that comes from a root that's relating to rulership. So let's just read what they have to say about that. So in Old Irish, her name is Maeve. This is generally believed to come from the Proto-Celtic medu, mead, or medwa, intoxicating. And the meaning of her name has thus been interpreted as mead woman, or she who intoxicates. This is thought to reflect her role as a sovereignty goddess. In ancient and medieval Ireland, the drinking of mead was a key part of a king's inauguration ceremony. And then just at the bottom here as well, it says, however, it is also suggested that the name comes from the Proto-Celtic medwa, the ruler. And I'm going to show how these linguistic roots, they ultimately trace back to a Proto-Indo-European root, which has cognates in the Greek language as well. And actually, some of them, it's surprising how very, very similar they are. So, but yes, the intoxication here as well, definitely seeing that in the mystery texts, and I'll show some more on that later. So immediately I'm seeing this mention of intoxication, or I'm seeing this connection with this med root, and immediately my mind's thinking of the mysteries in general. So we're going to get into that. Okay, so an overview of a sovereignty goddess, just for those who maybe haven't heard of this phrase before. Oh, sorry, I've just missed a section on this previous one here. So here it says, it is likely, and this is Thomas O'Malley who wrote about this. It says, it is likely that the sacred marriage ceremony between the king and the goddess would involve a shared drink. Maeve's pillow talk, which is a section in the Toyn at the beginning of the Toyn, argument with a consort, contains suggestions of matrilineality, as does Allele's taking his name from his mother. So I just wanted to point that out because obviously last week we were looking at matrilocal. So I thought that was quite interesting because, as I was saying, I'm thinking about, are there elements that could be pre-Celtic that have been preserved, or are they shared Indo-Europeans, or could it be a case of it was shared among pre-Indo-European people, and then it's been preserved separately in different locations, and that's why it's slightly different. So these are all possibilities, and I'm not sold exactly on one idea either. So, but just to put it out there, that's kind of where my mind's thinking when I'm thinking about this stuff. Okay, so sovereignty goddess. It's a scholarly term almost exclusively used in Celtic studies. And it says, although parallels for the idea have been claimed in other traditions, usually under the label hieros gamos, and in the scholarly paper we're going to look at in a moment, it's going to talk about that. So the term denotes a goddess who, personifying a territory, confers sovereignty upon a king by marrying or having sex with him. It is also clear that medieval Irish rituals, so I'm just jumping down to the next highlighted section there if you're trying to follow along. So I've put these up so you can pause them, read the rest of it at your leisure, but there's too much to get through, so I've just tried to highlight the bits that are the most pertinent. It is also clear that medieval Irish rituals inaugurating the new king sometimes took the form of a banais ríghe, or a wedding feast of kinship. So this is what we're going to look at shortly. Because the king was imagined symbolically to be marrying his dominion, and that similar rituals known by the term feis might involve both sexual activity and horses, in turn evoking the idea prominent in modern scholarship of Celtic horse goddesses. And I should have said earlier, there is a trigger warning here, because we're going to be looking at sources which talk about sexuality, intoxicating substances, body fluids. So guys, I know if you've not seen anything like this before, it might be quite shocking. Hold on with me, bear with me, because right at the end we've got some archaeological evidence to show that it might not be as crazy sounding as what you think immediately. We have to detach our mind from this modern lens that we're viewing history through, and this actual Maeve and this kind of story may go back a lot longer than we realise. So please just bear that in mind. So most luridly, Geraldus Cambrensis, in his 1188 Topographia Hibernica, claimed that at the inauguration of the king of Kenalconnell, the successor to the kingship publicly sexually embraced a white mare. This would then be slaughtered and cooked into a broth in which the king bathed before he and his people drank it. Now, there's mention of horse sacrifice in other Proto-Indo-European groups of people who've descended from that branch. And I've also seen mention of this embracing of a horse as well. And I believe there's some laws out there on the Celtic side, which may actually relate to that, but I need to double check on it, which is why I'm not going into that any further. But I believe I've seen something relating to that as I've been looking through some sources. Cormac's glossary, circa 900 AD, recounts that St. Patrick banished those mantic rites of the Fili, and they were the seers, the Celtic seers, so ban Fili. And mantic obviously means prophecy, and mantis was a prophet or seer. Now, a good example is the pervasive and persistent concept of the hierogamy, or sacred marriage, of the king with the goddess of sovereignty. The sexual union, or banais ríghe, wedding of kinship, which constituted the core of the royal inauguration, seems to have been purged from the ritual at an early date through ecclesiastical influence, but it remains at least implicit and quite often explicit for many centuries in the literary tradition. Okay, so there's often a lot of debate as to how much of this information was kind of put onto a back burner or swept under the rug once ecclesiastical influence, kind of got its hands on the material. In the scholarly articles we're going to look at, they are also going to cite the fact that because this shares so many similarities with other cultures and religions, they therefore deduce that it can't be a later medieval insertion, that it has to actually be a preserved older myth. And it's very interesting here and that's why I've highlighted it as, Cormac's glossary is obviously talking about the ecclesiastical influence here as well. So, because we always need to find, is this a preservation or is it a rewriting, a later telling? So I think that's quite interesting just to bear in mind as we're going along. So hieros gamos, for those who are unfamiliar. So literally, holy marriage is a sacred marriage that takes place between gods, especially when enacted in a symbolic ritual where human participants represent the deities. Okay, so bear that in mind. We've got human participants representing the deities. So they are playing that role. They are embodying that deity in the ritual. Sacred sexual intercourse. Now, this is in relating to Sumeria now. And I want you to notice as well how it's the high priestess who's carrying out the ritual here. Sacred sexual intercourse is thought to have been common in the ancient Near East as a form of sacred marriage, or hieros gamos, between the kings of a Sumerian city-state and the high priestess of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love. And notice it's love, fertility, and warfare, because we're also going to see the warfare aspect in Maeve as well. And quite often this aspect, I feel, is not glossed over, but for the people who maybe just have a surface level understanding of some of the goddesses, it's maybe not immediately apparent, but you know, it seems an intrinsic element to the role. And look here, it says the high priestess would choose for her bed a young man who represented the shepherd, Dumudzid, consort of Inanna, in a hieros gamos, celebrated during the annual Duku ceremony just before invisible moon with the autumn equinox. So it's a autumn equinox ritual as well. So I haven't actually looked into coincidence with any of the celebrations on the Irish side, so that's on the back burner for another time. I actually had to condense this massively because it was overrunning, so that's something else to look at in the future. And now this hieros gamos, obviously that is Greek, so it is in the Greek mythology here as well. So in Greek mythology, the classical instance is the wedding of Zeus and Hera, celebrated at the Heraion of Samos, along with its architectural and cultural predecessors. Some scholars would restrict the term to reenactments, but most accept its extension to real or simulated union in the promotion of fertility. Such an ancient union of Demeter with Iason, who was involved with the Samothracian mysteries, enacted a thrice ploughed furrow, a primitive aspect of a sexually active Demeter reported by Hesiod. So they go on whether to say whether it was more figurative or whether there were, you know, sexually explicit things going on. However, when I've looked at sources relating to the Samothracian mysteries, for example, Herodotus, when describing them, when he describes the rites, he uses the word orgia, which is the same. Well, it's where the word ultimately orgy comes from, and I'll show you that in a minute or so. There definitely does seem to have been a sexual aspect to it. So let's take a look. So here, this is the text from Herodotus. I use it in my Pelasgian videos, so if you want to go and check those out, they'll be in a playlist on my channel here. So, but look, see the bit that I've underlined here. It says, and it is from them that the Samothracians take their rites. And then in the Greek, we have kai paratouton samothraikes ta orgia paralambanusi. So the word we're looking for there for rites is ta orgia. And as we can see on Perseus Tufts, orgia, secret rites, secret worship practiced by the initiated. And then look, a post-Homeric word used of the worship of Demeter at Eleusis. And just down here under Roman numeral number 2, and then on the second entry, it says metaphor, mysteries without reference to a religion. And then we have the etymology for the English word orgy here, originally in plural from French orgier, maybe. I don't know how to pronounce French. Maybe someone can correct me in the chat. From Latin orgia, from ancient Greek orgia, and then it gives the definition there that we've just looked at, secret rites or mysteries. Now, the article or the journal that I'm referencing here, it's by Dr. Britta Erslinger from the University of Freiburg, and it's called Maeve, the Intoxicating One. So there'll be links in the description below, because I've just used snippets here. It's a really long journal. It's a really good piece. For anyone who's interested, take a look at it. She's compiled other scholars from, going back to the 1800s to modern scholars. She's compiled what they all say to give quite a weighed up and nuanced paper, in my opinion. So definitely go and check that out. As I said, it'll be in the description box below. So what I want you to be looking out for is intoxication, her bestowing the sovereignty onto the king, her having multiple partners who are king, and also we're going to look at some linguistic connections here. So this is what Dr. Britta Erslinger's got to say. So an essential feature of sacral kingship is the ritual of hieros gamos, the sacred marriage between the king and a goddess. Now, see how she says goddess, but we just saw that in Sumeria, that it was the high priestess who embodied the goddess. So that could be what a case of what we've got here. It might be a real person, a high priestess, embodying that role. So the sacred marriage between the king and a goddess held to embody the concept of territorial sovereignty. This ritual involved the mating of the king with the local territorial goddess, who bestowed the sovereignty onto him, and, as many scholars believe, also served him alcoholic beverages. Hieros gamos shows that the medieval sovereignty allegory preserves the central aspects of an archaic fertility ritual, which is also suggested by the Irish designation of the inauguration ceremony of the king as banais ríghe, wedding of kinship. So again, she's saying here that this hieros gamos shows that this is the preservation of a much older practice. Now she's going to go into the etymology here. At present, scholarly considerations on Maeve mostly focus on this context, with her name meaning the intoxicated one or mead woman. She is believed to be one of the goddesses who can bestow sovereignty onto a king. So your king, through her, she chooses the king. Considering the wide consensus with regard to Maeve's divine origin and the etymology of her name, the matter seems very uncontroversial. So Britta Erslinger here is saying that, you know, the connection here to mead, it doesn't seem uncontroversial. It's kind of, you know, been a bit of a consensus for quite a while. However, this etymology, which was not questioned for almost 100 years, is now being seriously challenged by a new proposal by Pinault, who claims that Maeve is based on Medwa, the ruler. Okay, so we have two different roots here, one relating to rulership, one relating to intoxication. And there might actually be a little bit of wordplay between the two as well, which might explain why she almost fits both roles. The name Maeve is assumed to be cognate with Celtic Medu, mead, from Proto-Indo-European, Medu, which means mead or honey, continued by the Old Irish mid, Old Welsh meth, Welsh meth, and Breton mes. The adjective medwa is derived from this noun and underlies Old Irish mave, strong or intoxicating, Welsh meddu, Breton mes, mes, drunk. Most scholars agree that Maeve is a feminine form of the adjective or a feminine derivation of the noun meaning mead woman. Okay, and I'm just going to show you how some of these words actually have cognates in the Greek, and I've used Welsh here just because that's the language I'm most familiar with, the Celtic language I'm most familiar with. And look how similar these words are. So on the left, medhu, wine in the Greek, compared to meth on the right, which means mead. And it actually even cites Greek medhu there, which I've underlined. And you actually also have another word, medos, which is a kind of mead. It's like a honeyed, sweet honeyed drink. And this is in the Greek, so you have medos as well. Then on the left, Greek, methuo, to be drunken with wine, compared with Welsh on the right side of the screen, medhu. And remember, if you take the conjugations away from the Greek to just leave the the stem, it's Meddu in the Greek, which is almost the same as you have in the Welsh Meddu, and it even mentions Medduo there, which I've underlined. And then we have Medo, protect or rule over. This is on the left in the Greek at the bottom again. And it says, notice how there, feminine Medusa there, as of the Gorgon. So this root is also the root of the name Medusa there also. And then compare on the other side, Medaf or Methi. And then it says Greek Medomai, which is another form of the Greek word Medo there. And it says, yeah, from Medo, to rule, control, or have authority. So I just wanted to show you how incredibly similar they are. Okay, now she's citing Zimmer here, who's writing in 1911. And I mean, this guy, he's full of the sensibilities of this era. You know, even in his text, he literally refers to Maeve as a drunken hussy. So I'm sure his, which, you know, sounds absolutely terrible now, especially for somebody writing in an academic context. So I just want to show you how our lens that we view this through, or the lens that he viewed it through, is at that period of time changes, whereas the lens that they would have, the reality that they would have been experiencing at that time, you know, might have been different. So I'm just trying to highlight we need to look at this objectively and scientifically. So Zimmer argues that Maeve's behaviour, especially with regard to sexuality, reflects the customs and moral values of a matriarchal pre-Celtic society. So, and I think I've removed a bit of this actually, but he's got like a superiority complex as well with regards to this. So he looks at this what he calls a pre-Celtic matriarchal society as being lesser and inferior. And I don't think I've put it in here because I've had to cut sections of it out. So in a previous article, Zimmer had attributed this social system to the Picts, who he assumed to have settled originally through Britain and Ireland. The Celts, Indo-Europeans, or Aryans, as Zimmer calls them, invaded the islands and subjugated the indigenous population. However, they only partly succeeded in imposing their own patriarchal culture upon their subjects. As a result, the medieval Irish sagas document relics of the matriarchal values and practices, especially within the domain of female sexuality. And I just want to say, though, with the information that we've got now, we know that there was Bronze Age migrations prior to the Celts. You know, the Celts proper, speaking the Celtic language, and it was these people who seemed to interact with the early European farmers. We also know that the Picts aren't, you know, they have an Indo-European element to them. So the Picts aren't just the early European farmers or the indigenous hunter-gatherers. It seems like they descend from them potentially, because, you know, Cheddarman, he had this genetic haplogroup which was found in the matrilocal female matrilocal society. And, you know, they did mention that this could potentially go back to the Bronze Age and could be indicative of a more communal society where values in the land. So I just want to say, just to point really what he's saying there with regards to that, it's a very outdated, you know, way of thinking. But I've kept it in just because he does mention the sexuality. He mentions that he believes it's a pre-Celtic influence, potentially. So I thought, because we're looking at these, because this pre-Celtic kind of stuff keeps cropping up, so I thought I would keep elements of it in. And he also mentions that the Irish sagas document these older matriarchal values. So to me, that was really important just to keep in there, just to highlight. And O'Malley supports his assumption with evidence from both genealogical and narrative texts. The latter particularly emphasizes Maeve's enormous sexual capacity, which is also hinted at by her famous statement in the Pillow Talk. So for those of you who haven't read the Toyn, At the start, Maeve and her husband Alil, they're lying in bed and they're kind of back and forth at each other over who's got, you know, the best kind of, you know, horse or the best kind of, well, bull or cattle. And but it's very apparent Maeve's, she says to him, look, you're only king because of me. She's very, very quick to, you know, quit back at him. So it's a very interesting dynamic, actually. So go and check out the Tanbo Kulnia if you haven't already. And this is what she says in the Pillow Talk section of the Toyn. I was never without one man in the shadow of another. On the other hand, genealogical sources report a succession of husbands for both Maeve of Cruacha and her doublet Maeve Lethderg, which it means half red or red side of Leinster. And here's another quote here. Great indeed was the strength and power of that Maeve over the men of Ireland, for she would not allow a king in Tara without his having herself as a wife. So there you go. It's very, very on the nose that to be king, you had to go through Maeve. In another short article, Thurnason adduces parallels from Sumerian texts for the hieros gamos as an inauguration ritual. Finally, O'Reilly combines O'Malley's interpretation of Maeve as the Flath Eren, the sovereignty of Ireland, with Thurnason's hypothesis of her divine origin, claiming that the former developed from the latter. She became thus a goddess queen of Ireland, who weds each high king in turn. Originally associated with Tara, she has nothing to do with Cruacha or Connaught. Her name reflects the most crucial part of the wedding ceremony, the one in which the bride hands over to the bridegroom a cup filled with an alcoholic beverage. Now, as I said before, literally mentioning here the hieros gamos, certainly on the Greek side, the cup of communion and the mysteries there is quite paramount. And looking at some of the other texts or other scholars who look at the texts, they also say that there was intoxicating ingredients in there. There's now archaeological evidence out there which also backs that up. So, you know, don't discount this mix of intoxication, the inauguration, which is the initiation, the cup, and also the sexual connotations. According to Muir, names like the anglicised Ballipitmaeve. So this next section is actually really interesting because there's also topological features, so regions of the land, mountains and stuff, that are named after Maeve's reproductive organs, sexual organs. And there's also mention of a cave as well, with a carving in Ogham on the cave, which says, you know, son of Maeve. Now, what's super interesting about that is the cave seems to have quite a lot of connections to the mystery initiation. So some scholars say the mystery initiations took place in a cave. And it's just very interesting to me that there's also a cave which seems to have an inscription with Maeve's name on it as well. So according to Muir, names like the anglicised Ballipitmaeve from Irish Ballapit Maeve, town of Maeve's vulva, or Soul Pit Maeve, likeness of Maeve's vulva, suggest that Maeve was an earth or fertility goddess. She also argues that Maeve's association with the cave of Cruacha, also known as Owenagat, could point towards the same conclusion, i.e. that Maeve's vulva was considered as an entrance into the earth. This could explain the presence in the cave of a stone with the enigmatic Ogham inscription, Uriki Maki Medwi, or Freoch, son of Maeve. So there's more information in the journal about this. So definitely check that out as you when you get a chance. Egeler has recently examined the arguments in favour of Maeve's divine origin from a typological perspective. He identifies 5 motifs that Maeve shares with the goddess Inanna Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus, and Freya. Namely, 1, her warlike aspects, you know, Wirago, her marked sexuality, and the early death of her lovers, and her association with kingship and birds. So this scholar's specifically making connections to these goddesses, which is very interesting. And I can't speak for Nana Ishtar because I've not looked at that side, but certainly, you know, with Aphrodite and Venus, I can see that connection, and certainly with Freya as well. You know, she's involved with, she has quite a sexual element to her as well. As these 5 features occur, so this is where they're going to talk about how all of these similarities would seem to indicate that it's not a later medieval creation, but that it's an older story that's been preserved. As these 5 features occur with goddesses belonging to different cultures, they are likely to be the heritage of pre-Christian mythology rather than literary inventions by medieval Irish writers or poets. The significant occurrence of these combined features, strengthened by the parallels with a number of other goddesses, make Maev's divine origin more probable than it would be on the basis of the Irish sources alone. So this scholar is actually saying these similarities between the, you know, the wider scope, the wider cultural sphere actually strengthen this notion. And I would agree. This is especially true with regards to the bestowing of kingship resulting from the marriage between the king and the goddess or priestess embodying the goddess. Egeler argues that the warlike character, the multiple lovers, and the marked sexuality are not unrelated features, but rather different aspects intrinsic to the function of a goddess of kingship. Okay, this is just one of my notes. Maeve has warlike aspects and is called a wirago in Toyn Boculnia. She also musters troops, leads bands of warriors and battles against male heroes. And here, look at the word wirago from the Lewis and Short Latin dictionary. A manlike, vigorous, heroic maiden, a female warrior, heroine, wirago. And then it says, look here, of Diana, of Juturna, of an Amazon. So there's those Amazonian warriors. And here, this is interesting because if Maeve considers a husband no longer the rightful king, then she'll find another suitable candidate. So if she, Maeve, considers him no longer as the rightful king, she examines candidates and chooses the king through sexual intercourse and or through the presentation of a drink. The undeserving candidate fails the test or even dies. Not all of these motifs appear in each tale. So what's interesting about that is the scholars who write about the mystery religions in over on the Greek side, the initiations seem to combine elements of poison and antidote. So it's interesting that here that undeserving candidates fail the test or can potentially die here as well. Not all of these motifs appear in each tale. They rather appear in clusters and may emphasize one aspect or another. The presentation of a drink may be missing, but the motif of sexual intercourse is normally present, even when it is not mentioned explicitly. And then here's another little note here. It says, this goddess is the Celtic goddess, the continuation of a pre-Indo-European goddess. Maeve occupies a special position within the host of goddesses, and in McCanna's words, she is the outstanding figure of the territorial goddess and the paragon of womanhood. And so Maeve Lethderg here, according to the Book of Leinster, she's had multiple husbands here as well. So as it says, she's married successively to 5 husbands belonging to different generations who acquire the kingship of Tara through her. O'Malley concludes from this combined event that Maeve was once the sovereignty of Ireland, which was alternatively held by Connaught and Leinster dynasties. And then it says here, note, McKenna thus claims that the sovereignty myth is not only a relic of pre-Christian beliefs, but is also particularly archaic. So this is really important to me. This is another scholar who also concludes that this is a pre-Christian, an older pre-Christian belief, not an insertion by medieval authors. Most scholars share this assumption, but consider the myth as an element of proto-Indo-European rather than pre-Indo-European cultures. So there still seems to be a little bit of conflict as to whether it's an old Indo-European or if it's a surviving pre-Indo-European motif. And it's interesting because this kind of conflict comes up quite a lot, especially when I've been looking at the Pelasgians and things like that. Okay. Now we're going to try a video here. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I've cracked it this time. I know I messed it up last time, so let me see if I can do this. So this is John Wardell he's a Professor Emeritus of Archaeology, National University of Ireland, and he's giving a talk here. He's giving one about sacred kingship and also a sovereignty goddess, and he's just going to reinforce some of what we've just looked at. So let me just try and do this. Right, so we're going sacred kingship. And we should be at 10:4. I'm going to press play.
There may have been other sorts of elites at this period in late prehistory that perhaps we should consider.
Thumbs up.
The essential aspects of sacral kingship.
Can you hear that, guys?
Encapsulated in some of those mythic themes associated with the kings of Tara. A central theme is the idea, as we've already seen so many times, that a king was wedded to a woman who personified his kingdom.
Can you guys hear that okay? I'm just seeing if someone can let me know if the audio is coming through okay. Yes, great stuff. Thank you for that. Let's keep going. I'll just rerun it back a little bit here.
Elites at this period in late prehistory that perhaps we should consider. The essential aspects of sacral kingship are encapsulated in some of those mythic themes associated with the kings of Tara. A central theme is the idea, as we've already seen so many times, that a king was wedded to a woman who personified his kingdom. And this is seen in those encounters between the goddess of sovereignty and the kings Lird and Con, for example. And we know of some of the inauguration rituals associated with this symbolic marriage. The king is identified with the land and the cosmos, and he's a...
So notice that how it says the king is identified with the land and cosmos. That sounds very much, Uranos and Gaia to me, which, you find in some of the... what seem to be Orphic inscriptions.
Mediator between this world and the other world. And Tara, identified, as I've said, particularly with the Kingship of Ireland, was a special focus of supernatural intervention. The maintenance of the cosmic order and the prosperity of the land were dependent on a just and unblemished ruler who basically abided with his pact with the other world and observed each and every otherworldly taboo placed on him.
Okay, so we're just going to pause it there. So yeah, he had certain taboos that he also had to observe. Now I'm just, so there's a section here also which briefly mentions bull sacrifice and the kingship wedding. So I just wanted to get the timestamps for that because I don't want to let it just play on too much. So 11:28. So we're coming up to it. I'll let it run. Now, bull sacrifice. I just want you to bear that in mind. We're going to dive into that at another time, but it also seems to be a theme in these mysteries. So, for example, in Euripides' Bacchae, when Pentheus is going to be led out by Dionysus. I believe he sees him. He mentions him looking like a bull as well. Also, you know, it crops up in plenty of other places, and we're going to look at that another time. It's too deep to get into, but I just want you to notice that it does seem to have a significance here too. So notice how that's like a divination. That's a type of divination there. So he's drinking the bull's. Well, he said broth. I'm assuming that's. I don't know whether he means literally the blood or something that's made with the bull's meat after it's been slaughtered or whatever. But he goes to sleep and he sees the king in his dream. So very, very much a prophetic kind of practice there. And then we're looking at 1310 for the kingship wedding. Here we go. And I just want to say, you know, the image of a hero being in a bath as well. That this isn't the only place I've seen that as well. So let me just stop sharing that. Let's go and have a look at this other video now. He's going to talk about the sovereignty goddess. So we're at 2 minutes 40. And I've set that up.
Archaeological. And we saw already that she figures prominently in the Great Táin Bó Cúailnge, as she's probably best known as the protagonist in this famous epic. And here her character is a complex and indeed mainly medieval one. And in the Táin, she's generally cast in an unflattering light, due in great measure, I think, to the fact that in this cattle raid, she usurps the function of a man, and Christian misogyny comes into the depiction of her as well.
Notice how he mentions the lens from which the Christians were viewing this from, and how that you know, lends to her being depicted in an unfavorable light.
She, as the instigator of the cattle raid, she effectively dooms the initiative from the start. And as the pillar talk might indicate, in the second ascension of the Táin, she is the dominating partner in a marriage in which Alil, the king, is presented as a compliant spouse, quite tolerant of her promiscuity, especially with the prodigiously virile Fergus MacRoy, who we encountered yesterday as well. Her sexual capacity is apparent in other tales as well.
So yeah, he's going to talk about sexuality a little bit more now.
And elsewhere, she made the declaration, I was never without one man in the shadow of another. And in fact, she had at least 4 husbands, the compliant Alil being the last. In the early 20th century, her behavior was seen as a good illustration of the licentiousness and moral laxity of pre-Christian Ireland. But as the great Celtic scholar Prince MacCana once memorably put it, this is one of the not infrequent instances when bad morals make good mythology. And this may have...
Right, let's just see where we need to go to next. I don't want to keep you all too long. 742, 508. So we're going to 508 for this. Sorry, guys. No, we're nearly there. Just try to streamline it for us.
Her name is generally held to be cognate with words in Irish and other languages signifying drunkenness or drink-related, like the English word mead. And while it has been suggested that her name probably may mean the drunken one or she who intoxicates, it has been pointed out she herself is never seen as intoxicated, and it's possibly more likely that the name might mean she who is of the nature of mead, or some such meaning. She who belongs to the mead would be another possibility. And her name may have had the added attraction of ambiguity, because while the association with drink and mead is generally accepted, the name may also indicate, judging from its root, there may be an allusion here to one who rules or commands. And there's an Indo-European dimension to the motif of an intoxicating goddess associated with fertility and human kingship.
So again, he's mentioned the etymology of a name there, potentially, or seemingly connecting to mead, but also to one who rules. And he mentions very briefly, not in an over-top way there, about the wordplay. And the scholarly article that we've just been looking at, it also mentions that as well. So I just found that interesting. He also says there's a larger Indo-European dimension to this. So I just want to highlight that he's just reinforcing that there. And then finally, multiple king marriages at 742. Let's get this bit on. 742.
The unusual number of her husbands. And she had a Leinster counterpart in a Mev of Tara, of whom it was once said she would have no one as king in Tara unless she was his wife. And she too, according to one late medieval mention compiled in the 15th century, slept with 9 kings of the kings of Ireland. Once again, the multiple liaisons reflecting this multiple marriage scenario that we've seen. The connection of a female figure with land and its sovereignty is an enduring feature of Irish tradition. And in fact, at the very beginning of Irish pseudo-history, in the book of invasions, the Lower Gawala, when the sons of Neil, the mythical ancestors of the Gaelic Irish, defeat the gods of those 2 Donnan whom we've met, they encounter 3 goddesses, Banba, Fola, and Eru, and they meet at Uisneach in the very centre of Ireland, and Era gives her name to the island as a whole. Other goddesses like...
Okay, so he's just mentioning another kind of one of these figures who actually lends her name to Ireland as a whole there as well. So I just wanted to show that just very, very quickly there. Let's get this back on the stage. Okay, so I'm just going to show you an article written here by Dr. Amon Hillman. I know quite a few of you know who he is. You're familiar with his work. For those of you who don't, I know Amon. So I'm a student of his Greek. That's where I've been learning Greek from, and I've been doing that this is my 3rd year of doing that now. I'm about 2.5 years into the journey, and I've actually had a look at some of these texts which are mentioned in this article. And that's why when I've been looking at the Irish mythology, there's quite a lot of crossover here. Now, again, I'm going to say to those of you who've not seen this information before, it might come across as quite shocking. I would urge you to wait until the end, because I'm going to show you some archaeological evidence which actually backs this up. It's we're going to be talking about it scientifically, so let's proceed here. He's talking about the mysteries and what happens in the mystery rites. So he's very, very much spent his life studying the mystery religions. He also looks at the medical texts as well of the period, and he looks at some of the terms used in the rites, which are also pharmacological terms in the medical texts, and how there's a medical context there, which ultimately seems to, in my opinion, come down to us in the form of intoxication with Maeve. But there's a lot of similarities, including the same linguistic root actually in one of the figures that's mentioned in here. I'm going to put all the information in the description box as well, for where you can read this in full. I would advise you to do so. It's a very, very good and intriguing read. So, colleges of priestesses, environments in which women were recognized as physicians, oracles, and experts in the art of drug preparation, promoted the development of compound mixtures of plant and animal-derived toxins that were used in rites meant to induce observable psychosis in voluntary human subjects. And trigger warning, there's going to be body fluids, there's going to be substances in here. Cult members participating in these mystery operations consumed the blood, breast milk, and vaginal excreta of priestesses who were themselves chronically exposed to viperid venoms by means of vaginal suppositories and self-induced dermal lacerations. Okay, so again, I'm just talking about antiquity here. Administering drugs, the main, access to regions with high blood supply, it's going to be suppositories, and also lacerations where an impregnated bandage is applied to the wound. So a bandage covered in medication wrapped around the wound. And what he's saying is these priestesses, they're under chronic administration of certain substances such as viper venoms. And what happens is the body can then transform that. And it might sound crazy to you, but in the medical field, they're actively looking at snake venoms as hormone analogues. And, it is possible to give a compound to someone and for the body to transform it into something else. So that is also possible. So it's not, if you've not looked at this kind of thing before, you might think this is crazy, but it's definitely chemically viable. The consumption of a priestess's medicated body fluids within the context of private and semi-public initiation rituals were considered the culmination of an initiate's personal religious experience, a form of divine marriage. And again, like I said, it's not me making these connections. There's other scholars there connecting it to a larger Proto-Indo-European context and literally making connections to some of these Greek mysteries. So I'm just now showing you information from someone who's very well studied and read in these Greek mysteries, so that we can start trying to piece together, what are these words being used, why are they important, why is intoxication such a huge thing in this, sacred kingship wedding. Communal substances administered to initiates during ritual sex acts formed an important and complex component of ancient mystery religion performances. Drug concoctions, compounded by specialist priestesses, contain numerous plants and animal-derived toxins, creating a complex pharmacological process whereby communal drug mixtures induced a much desired ecstatic psychosis in participants, while concomitantly protecting these same subjects from the adverse side effects of venom and toxin exposure. So what it's saying is there's a balancing act going on here. It's complex polypharmacy. It's not just one substance, it's multiple substances, some in really minute measures, and it's a poison being set by an antidote, so that you don't die from the effects of the poison, and it can do other things to the body. Using the technical language developed by late Bronze Age, circa 1200 to 1000 BC, mystery religions preserved within classical Greek and Latin religious and medical texts, it is possible to trace these sophisticated pharmaceutical practices back to a single priesthood and its founding priestess, Medea, a historically prominent monarch of the Eastern Black Sea kingdoms of Colchis, was considered the most drug-savvy priestess of her generation and the founder of what has come to be known as to the historians as the Orphic Mysteries. And I just thought it was interesting how the professor we looked at earlier said the king served as, this intermediator between, the earth and the cosmos, which is reminiscent to me of some of the sayings I've seen in some of the Orphic-related texts, such as being the son of Uranos and Gaia there. So I just thought that was interesting to note. So the Dracaena, or dragon priestess, was a prominent presiding authority in the performance of ancient mystery initiations. Considered to be masters of poisons, dragon priestesses performed necromantic initiation rituals meant to induce a resurrection state in novitates, a process called new birth. This metaphysical transformation was viewed as the soul's entrance into the ion, a transdimensional space that simultaneously bounded and encompassed, in terms of ancient physics, the time stream of the material cosmos. And it says here, this new birth of mystery initiates was accomplished by the consumption of a compound drug mixture, followed by the supplemental ingestion of blood, milk, and ejaculate derived from an only begotten saviour belonging to the kingdom of God. Now, a lot of what's driving these cult texts is what was coined by Otto Kern as the Orphic Vox. And a lot of these texts, that they say things on a surface level, which you would just read and kind of gloss over, but he's pieced it together and gone, look, they're actually conveying an underlying meaning here. And from having looked at some of these texts, I can see that there's something similar going on in the Irish texts as well. And I'm going to show you how I think there's a section relating to Cuchulainn, which seems to intimate that he's been through a rite. And it might sound crazy, but in the Táin, Cuchulainn has a raven-feathered mantle, which was given to him by Simon Magus. Now, Medea, which was just mentioned earlier, the Magi seem to have, been established by her. And Simon Magus is one of the Magi. And Cuchulainn just so happens to have a raven-feathered mantle from him in the Táin Bó Cúailnge. Mugruth, who's also another person mentioned in Irish mythology, is also mentioned as training with Simon Magus. And okay, we might think this is just mythology, it's bonkers, but actually what is the icing on the cake for this is this historical records from the Saxon Apostolic Church to the Celtic Christians referring to their tonsure as the Simon Magus tonsure as well. So there's something going on, and they seem to wear this Simon Magus tonsure. And in the text as well, I'm just seeing what I think means he's been in a mystery initiation, because as well, you have to realize that later on there was other forms of rites which were not female led, and I think Cuchulainn has potentially been through a rite like that. And I'll let you figure that out, but we're going to read this passage. And also, Maeve gives him in the Feast of Brícru, which this is from, she gives him a dragon stone as well. So there's 3 champions vying for the champions portion. Cuchulainn wins. He's given a golden cup with birds on, which are related to this, kind of archetypal figure. But underneath it has a dragon stone as big as his 2 eyes. Now, it doesn't say what the dragon stone is, but when you read, for example, the Orphic Lithica, and Lithica, lithos being stone, it becomes very apparent that they're not necessarily talking about stones. So I'm just going to put that out there before I read this. So let's get into it. In the chariot, a dark, melancholy man. So, sorry, just to give you a bit of context here. Maeve is, he has these chariots approaching. She gets Finnebar to say, who's coming, and she says there's 3 champions, and she describes them all in turn. And this is Cuchulainn who's coming up, and they're vying for the champion's portion. In the chariot, a dark, melancholy man, comeliest of the men of Erin. Around him a soft crimson pleaning tunic, fastened across the breast where it stands open, with a salmon brooch of inlaid gold, against which his bosom heaves, beating in full strokes. A long-sleeved linen kirtle with a white hood, embroidered red and flaming gold, set in each of his eyes 8 red dragon gemstones, his 2 cheeks blue, white, and blood red. And notice how the blood and the milk is related to the rite. He emits sparks of fire and burning breath. Well, in the Mithras liturgy, when they see the deity, when they go through the rite, it's breathing fire. With a ray of love in his look. And okay, so a ray of love, I mean, is that anything to do with Eros here? A shower of pearls, it seems, has fallen into his mouth. Well, I'll let you figure that one out. And then later on in the Feast of Brecrew, Cuchulainn got up. In fact, before I do that, if you want to know more about some of the practices that these magi were doing, these early Christian sects, I've got some videos on that as well, so you can check it out and you can see, some of these rites. Cuchulainn got up, he accompanied Maeve into the palace, and Ailill bade him a warm welcome. A cup of gold was given him full of luscious wine, and having on the bottom of it birds chased in precious stone. With it, in preference to everyone else, there was given him a lump as big as his 2 eyes of dragon stone. And notice how it's the dragon priestess who runs these rites. Now you have the feast of a champion, said Maeve. I wish you may enjoy it 100 years at the head of all the Ulster heroes. So he's the mention being the head of the heroes. She talks about when everyone walks into the mead house, you and your wife will precede them from now on. And here, I just want to show how there is a linguistic root as well between Medea, mentioned in this text, and one of the proposed etymologies of Maeve as well. So Medea, the founder of the poison-wielding Medo-Persian Magi, and I've just said about Simon Magus, who is in the Irish mythology, bore the same priestly linguistic root med in her name, and was said to be both the first priestess of the dragon priesthood as well as the most accomplished in drug use. The same root med is found in Latin words connected to the practice of the medicus physician. And look, medo, which we looked at earlier, protect or rule over. You can see Medusa there of the Gorgon. And then there's this note just from our Britta Erslinger's journal here. Pinault then wonders whether other Celtic names containing the element med can be associated with the verb med rather than with medu, mead. In particular, Maeve. So he's saying, is Maeve actually derived from this med root? The underlying medwa can be explained as the feminine form of medwas, meaning she who rules or female ruler. And then it says, see Greek, phulo Medusa. So she who governs the tribe. So Medusa, it's just like a feminine ruler. This meaning is fitted for a figure who is traditionally described as a queen. So look at that. That's specifically mentioning this root here, which Dr. Hillman also mentions relating to the mysteries. So that's really interesting. And then here we have a quick mention about the wordplay element as well. Since medu, ruler or power in Celtic, was homophonous, so, sounded like, with medu, mead, so because they sounded similar or the same, Lambert suggests that wordplays might have occurred. He discusses other examples. You can go and check that out afterwards. But I just want to point out that he's saying there could be a wordplay here, and that's why there's almost a blurring of these 2 roots and the connotations and meanings, and how it's intoxication, healing, and bestowing this rulership, or bringing them into the fold of being a ruler or a sovereign there. And here, look, just to show medo there from Proto-Indo-European, from med. And look, it can mean, or it gives rise to words that mean to measure, give advice, or healing. And then finally, in antiquity, Ethnogenic drugs administered in concert with sexual acts were considered an avenue for facilitating a sacred mystery union of an initiate and a divinity. This union was considered a divine marriage. Medea's ritual communion was the combination of one particular arotoxin and its antidote, aptly named galene or calm. In addition to viper venom, psychotropic mushrooms, and meadow saffron, Medea's ios contained the famous purple or porphyra, a textile dye obtained from marine mollusks, the murex. The dye was responsible for its colour. And in the Toynbee Culnia, we have this mention of Maeve. There came to me a tall, beautiful woman with a pale, tender face and long cheeks. She had long, fair hair and 2 golden birds on her shoulder. She wore a dark, purple, hooded mantle. So they've described Maeve as purple there. And the word being used is corcarda there. Sorry, I've pronounced that completely wrong. And then have a look. So this is from John O'Brien's English-Irish dictionary. Corcur means red or purple, Greek porphyra there. So he's even citing Greek porphyra. And then this is the medieval Irish dictionary here, which literally cites Latin purpura, or the murex or purple fish. And then just showing you there from the Lewis and Short, we have purpura there, and it says see Greek porphyra, the purple fish or the dye obtained from it, and the same in Greek, the purple fish there, or the dye obtained from it there. So it's interesting that they chose to depict Maeve with the purple also in the mythology. And now we're getting onto the archaeological evidence, and you know, Dr. Hillman's shown this on his YouTube channel. I'll also put the link for that in the description. But it's just great how it completely it has the same substances in this find from Ptolemaic era Egypt to exactly what Dr. Hillman's saying is is being used from what he can see in the medical text and the text relating to the mysteries. So Egyptians drank psychedelic drug concoction from this 2,000-year-old mug, study finds. And look, it says here, it was likely used around the 2nd century BC during Egypt's Ptolemaic era. So we're right into that Greek era within Egypt there. The psychedelic components they found include the plant Peganum harmala, also known as Syrian rue, whose seeds can induce dreamlike visions. They also discovered traces of Egyptian lotus, which is a mild sedative that causes feelings of euphoria. And guys, I told you, if you're new to this stuff, it might sound crazy, but look here. In addition to the psychedelic residue, scientists found that the cup contained traces of a variety of substances, including alcohol, honey, sesame seeds, pine nuts, licorice, and grapes. The analysis also revealed the presence of what may be human blood and other bodily fluids. And then this is a quote from somebody from the University of Trieste in Italy. Proteins from blood, vaginal mucus, and possibly breast milk were identified. These fluids may have held symbolic or ritual significance, emphasizing themes of life, fertility, and regeneration, says Greco. The inclusion of human fluids such as blood and mucus secretions were an unexpected and highly symbolic element. And then they go on to say here, in the Greek cult of Asclepius, god of medicine, sick worshippers had to spend the night in the sanctuary and wait to be visited by the god, curing them during their dreams. Tanasi adds, those dreams were triggered by drugs, pharmaca, dispensed by the priests. And these magi, they have got an in-depth knowledge of these pharmaca, which literally means drugs. And it's, you know, where pharmacy comes from, pharmacology, etc. It's the same root there. So our research confirms an earlier practice that has later comparisons in several other cultures. So there you go. That's going to be the end of today's presentation. But in my opinion, from the information that I've seen, the Maeve texts seem to be preserving an older, wider practice with elements of the mystery religions in there. So I think it's a preservation, whether in part or whether it's just being passed down, you know, case of Chinese whispers over the years that it's become diluted. But that's my opinion based on the information that I've seen here. And I'm not the only one making these connections either. There's other scholars out there making them. So the important thing is, let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I'm just going to have a scan through the comments now. Sorry, guys, that I haven't been doing that, but because I'm on the spectrum, I can only really focus all of my attention on one thing. And even just seeing the chat come up on the side, it distracts me and I lose my place. So I'm sacrificing looking at that to try and give you a better experience and a better presentation. So I hope you all don't mind. So let's just have a quick look, see who's here. Hey, Carrie Ann Chrysler, great to see you. Thanks for all the support. You know, it's great to see you here. Amber Morton, great. Thanks for being here. Hey, Witch Doctor, thanks for dropping by. Rising, great to see you. Thanks for all the support there. Uncanny Mountain, great to see you back. Just seeing if there's any particular questions in here. Okay, so thanks everyone. Oh, Nancy, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Excellent to see you all here. It's great to see everyone coming back. So thanks so much for the support. I'm going to head off now, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll post those links shortly. So peace. Take care, guys. All the best. God, I'm back. I forgot to end it. Another schoolboy error there. Have a good night, everyone.